Hello, my sleep-deprived friends, and welcome back to Boring Sleepy History. So glad you're joining me tonight for another episode of deliciously dull historical dives. Snuggle in, find your most comfortable position, maybe grab a warm drink. Let's let those eyelids get heavy. Let the soothing sounds wash over you. Are you nestled in your bed, perhaps? Or maybe you're listening whilst catching the last rays of sunset where you are. Wherever you are, wherever you're listening from, I hope you're feeling peaceful. Don't forget to like and subscribe for more sleepy tales, so you never miss an episode of our wonderfully monotonous journey through time. Hit that notification bell too, if you want to be gently nudged into the land of Nod. Tonight, we're going back, way back. Imagine, if you will, a world without screens, without supermarkets, without even a decent pillow. Imagine the chill dawn mist clinging to your skin, the gnawing hunger in your belly, the constant awareness of predators lurking just beyond the firelight. We're stepping into the shoes, or rather the hide sandals, of a Stone Age nomadic clan, following 3 individuals through a single relentless 24-hour cycle of struggle and survival. We'll explore the Nan, the constant, pervasive struggle for each precious calorie, each breath, each moment of fleeting warmth. Let's dive into the surprisingly exhausting reality of why it sucked to live in the Stone Age. The first biting chill of the pre-dawn air pricked my skin. I stirred, a low groan escaping my lips as the cold seeped through the thin animal hides that served as my bedding. The rough stone beneath me felt cold and unyielding, a stark contrast to the warmth I'd felt just hours before. A faint scent, like a whisper on the wind, reached my nostrils. Wood smoke, lingering from last night's fire. It was a comforting smell, a familiar reassurance in the pre-dawn gloom. My belly rumbled, a hollow ache that spoke of a long night's fast. Sleep hadn't offered much solace. My dreams were a jumble of fleeting images, the chase of a swift deer, the sharp tang of blood, and the worry etched on the face of the old woman as she tended the sick child. Weariness clung to me, heavy as the damp earth outside. Each muscle ached, a testament to yesterday's hunt, a reminder of the relentless effort required for survival. Yet there was also a strange sense of peace, a quiet acceptance of my place in the world. I was one among many, a small part of something larger than myself, our clan. We were bound together, not by blood alone, but by the shared struggle for existence, the common goal of keeping the fire burning, of keeping hunger at bay. A soft crackling sound drew my attention. I peered through the opening of the rock shelter. The first sliver of light was painting the eastern sky a pale, watery gray. The elders were already stirring, their silhouettes moving with the slow, deliberate grace of the very old. They were tending to the dying embers of the fire, coaxing them back to life with careful puffs of breath and the gentle addition of dry twigs. The air hummed with a low, almost imperceptible energy, the subtle sounds of awakening, A bird called in the distance, its cry echoing across the valley. The rustle of unseen creatures in the undergrowth accompanied the creak of branches shifting in the gentle morning breeze. It was a symphony of the wild, a constant reminder of our precarious existence within it. My role was clear: hunter. It was a responsibility I both feared and embraced. The hunt was a test of skill, endurance, and luck. Success meant sustenance for the clan. Failure, well, failure meant hunger gnawed deeper. The thought spurred me into action. I reached for my hunting spear, the rough-hewn shaft cold against my palm. The flint point felt sharp and reassuring, a familiar extension of my own will to survive. As I rose, stretching my stiff limbs, I felt the pull of duty, the urge to play my part in the never-ending dance between our clan and the harsh, beautiful wilderness that surrounded us. Today would be another day of struggle, and perhaps, if the spirits were kind, another day of triumph. The first biting chill of the pre-dawn air pricked my skin. I stirred, a low groan escaping my lips as the cold seeped through the thin animal hides that served as my bedding. The rough stone beneath me felt cold and unyielding, a stark contrast to the warmth I'd felt just hours before. A faint scent, like a whisper on the wind, reached my nostrils, wood smoke lingering from last night's fire. It was a comforting smell, a familiar reassurance in the pre-dawn gloom. My belly rumbled, a hollow ache that spoke of a long night's fast. Sleep hadn't offered much solace. My dreams were a jumble of fleeting images, the chase of a swift deer, the sharp tang of blood, the worry etched on the face of the old woman as she tended the sick child. Weariness clung to me, as heavy as the damp earth outside. Each muscle ached, a testament to yesterday's hunt, a reminder of the relentless effort required for survival. Yet there was also a strange sense of peace, a quiet acceptance of my place in the world. I was one among many, a small part of something larger than myself, our clan. We were bound together, not by blood alone, but by the shared struggle for existence, the common goal of keeping the fire burning, of keeping hunger at bay. A soft, crackling sound drew my attention. I peered through the opening of the rock shelter. The first sliver of light was painting the eastern sky a pale, watery gray. The elders were already stirring, their silhouettes moving with the slow, deliberate grace of the very old. They were tending to the dying embers of the fire, coaxing them back to life with careful puffs of breath and the gentle addition of dry twigs. The air hummed with a low, almost imperceptible energy, the subtle sounds of awakening. A bird called in the distance, its cry echoing across the valley. The rustle of unseen creatures in the undergrowth accompanied the creak of branches shifting in the gentle morning breeze. It was a symphony of the wild, a constant reminder of our precarious existence within it. My role was clear: hunter. It was a test of skill, endurance, and luck. Success meant sustenance for the clan. Failure, well, failure meant hunger gnawed deeper. The thought spurred me into action. I reached for my hunting spear, the rough-hewn shaft cold against my palm. The flint point felt sharp and reassuring, a familiar extension of my own will to survive. As I rose, stretching my stiff limbs, I felt the pull of duty, the urge to play my part in the never-ending dance between our clan and the harsh, beautiful wilderness that surrounded us. Today would be another day of struggle, and perhaps, if the spirits were kind, another day of triumph. The air hung heavy, thick with the scent of pine and damp earth. My breath hitched in my chest, a ragged puff against the sudden stillness. The deer, its fleeting form a memory, was forgotten. The rustling in the undergrowth hadn't been the wind, nor a rabbit. It had been something else. A low growl, rumbling from somewhere deep within the shadowed depths of the forest, vibrated through the ground and into my very bones. The sound was low, menacing, a primal tremor that chilled me to the core more effectively than the pre-dawn chill. Then, a flash of tawny fur, a blur of movement, and the wolf stood before me. Its eyes, twin pools of amber fire, were fixed on me, burning with an intensity that felt both predatory and ancient. Time seemed to slow. The forest around us, moments before teeming with life and movement, became eerily silent. Only the frantic hammering of my own heart filled the void. My hands, usually calloused and steady, trembled. The spear, my only defense, felt suddenly inadequate, a flimsy stick against the raw power before me. The wolf remained motionless, a statue sculpted from shadow and fur. It didn't advance, didn't growl again, but its presence was overwhelming. Its gaze held a silent assessment, weighing my worth, judging my potential as prey. I could smell it, a sharp, musky odor that mingled with the earthy scent of the forest, a smell both wild and utterly terrifying. My mind raced, fight or flight. The elders' teachings whispered through my memory, the importance of silence, the value of observation. But these were lessons learned during quieter hunts, not this brutal, intimate confrontation. My instinct screamed at me to flee, to vanish into the dense thicket behind me. Yet a part of me, a stubborn ember of defiance, refused to yield. Slowly, ever so slowly, I raised my spear, trying to maintain a steady hand. My muscles tensed, ready for whatever might follow. The wolf watched my every movement, its amber eyes unblinking, its powerful body coiled, ready to spring. Fear, raw and visceral, threatened to overwhelm me, but something deep within kept me rooted to the spot. Perhaps it was the hunger that gnawed at my belly, the responsibility to my clan. Or perhaps it was simply the sheer, brutal determination to survive this encounter. The wolf remained still, a creature of magnificent power and terrible beauty. The silence stretched, taut and unbearable, broken only by the occasional snap of a twig under the weight of my shifting weight. I tried to breathe evenly, to control the tremors of my hands and the rapid beating of my heart.
I focused on the wolf's movements, searching for any sign of its intentions, its next move. It felt like an eternity, an agonizing dance of survival played out under the watchful eyes of the ancient forest. Then, as suddenly as it had appeared, the wolf turned and melted back into the shadows, leaving me alone in the stillness of the forest.
The air hung heavy, thick with the scent of pine and damp earth. My breath hitched in my chest, a ragged puff against the sudden stillness. The deer, its fleeting form a memory, was forgotten. The rustling in the undergrowth hadn't been the wind, nor a rabbit. It had been something else. A low growl, rumbling from somewhere deep within the shadowed depths of the forest, vibrated through the ground and into my very bones. The sound was low, menacing, a primal tremor that chilled me to the core more effectively than the pre-dawn chill. Then, a flash of tawny fur, a blur of movement, and the wolf stood before me. Its eyes, twin pools of amber fire, were fixed on me, burning with an intensity that felt both predatory and ancient. Time seemed to slow. The forest around us, moments before teeming with life and movement, became eerily silent. Only the frantic hammering of my own heart filled the void. My hands, usually calloused and steady, trembled. The spear, my only defense, felt suddenly inadequate, a flimsy stick against the raw power before me. The wolf remained motionless, a statue sculpted from shadow and fur. It didn't advance, didn't growl again, but its presence was overwhelming. Its gaze held a silent assessment, weighing my worth, judging my potential as prey. I could smell it, a sharp, musky odor that mingled with the earthy scent of the forest, a smell both wild and utterly terrifying. My mind raced, fight or flight. The elders' teachings whispered through my memory, the importance of silence, the value of observation. But these were lessons learned during quieter hunts, not this brutal, intimate confrontation. My instinct screamed at me to flee, to vanish into the dense thicket behind me. Yet a part of me, a stubborn ember of defiance, refused to yield. Slowly, ever so slowly, I raised my spear, trying to maintain a steady hand. My muscles tensed, ready for whatever might follow. The wolf watched my every movement, its amber eyes unblinking, its powerful body coiled, ready to spring. Fear, raw and visceral, threatened to overwhelm me, but something deep within kept me rooted to the spot. Perhaps it was the hunger that gnawed at my belly, the responsibility to my clan. Or perhaps it was simply the sheer, brutal determination to survive this encounter. The wolf remained still, a creature of magnificent power and terrible beauty. The silence stretched, taut and unbearable, broken only by the occasional snap of a twig under the weight of my shifting weight. I tried to breathe evenly, to control the tremors of my hands and the rapid beating of my heart. I focused on the wolf's movements, searching for any sign of its intentions, its next move. It felt like an eternity, an agonizing dance of survival played out under the watchful eyes of the ancient forest. Then, as suddenly as it had appeared, the wolf turned and melted back into the shadows of the forest. The growl hung in the air, A low, guttural rumble that vibrated through the earth and into my very bones. My hand, still gripping the spear, trembled slightly. The wolf, a creature of shadow and muscle, remained motionless, its amber eyes fixed on me with unnerving intensity. Every muscle in my body screamed for action, to flee, to fight, but I remained frozen, the spear held before me like a fragile shield. The forest held its breath, the only sound the frantic beating of my own heart. My mind raced, desperate for a solution. Escape seemed impossible. This clearing offered no cover. A direct confrontation, however, felt like a death sentence. Then, through the thick undergrowth, I heard it. A faint, familiar call carried on the breeze. It was a low whistle, a sound we used to signal each other during hunts. My heart, which moments before had pounded like a drum, slowed its frantic rhythm. Relief washed over me, a wave of warmth spreading through my chilled body. It was my fellow hunter signaling my position. He was close enough to hear my struggle. Slowly, cautiously, I lowered my spear. The wolf, sensing the shift in my demeanor, remained alert but didn't attack. The tension, though still palpable, eased slightly. I strained my ears, listening for the whistle again, trying to pinpoint its origin. Another whistle, closer this time. A rustling in the bushes confirmed it. My fellow hunter was breaking through the undergrowth, his silhouette emerging from the shadows, spear held high. The wolf, faced with the sudden appearance of a second hunter, hesitated. The sudden shift in the balance of power was evident. It lowered its head slightly, its body tense, but the aggressive stance relaxed. There was a moment of intense stillness. 3 figures, perfectly frozen in time, held their breath. Then the wolf, with a final frustrated snarl, turned and vanished into the dense thicket. The rustling of leaves was the last sound we heard before silence returned. The smell of wood smoke lingered faintly, as if the wolf itself had been a nightmare born of the forest's depths. The forest itself breathed a sigh of relief, and it fell to the 3 of us to share the silence, while the sun slowly faded from our sight. My fellow hunter approached, his face etched with relief, as much for me as for the sudden appearance of a second threat. We exchanged a look, a silent acknowledgement of the near miss. We were alive. Without words, we collected our tools and headed back towards the grassland and the hope of finding a safer route home. A renewed appreciation of the importance of teamwork and the value of the hunter-gatherer's partnership warmed us more than any sun could have.
The comforting smell of wood smoke from the distant village, a welcome beacon against the encroaching evening chill, pulled my attention away from the forest and towards the promise of warmth and companionship. The sun, a molten orange ball sinking below the horizon, cast long, stretching shadows that danced and writhed like restless spirits. The air, thick with the scent of damp earth and decaying leaves just moments before, now carried the sharper, more inviting aroma of burning wood. It was a familiar scent, one that spoke of home, of shared meals, and the safety of the clan. My muscles ached. a dull throbbing that pulsed with each breath. The chase, the near miss with the wolf, it all seemed distant now, fading like the last embers of a dying fire. The tension that had coiled tightly in my chest began to unwind, replaced by a growing sense of relief. I had survived. More than that, I felt a deep satisfaction. I had faced the wild, and I had returned. My spear, still clutched in my hand, felt strangely light. The path back to the village was familiar, though the setting sun cast everything in a new, unfamiliar light. The undergrowth, once a maze of potential dangers, now seemed less menacing, almost friendly. The sounds of the forest, once a cacophony of potential threats, were now merely background noise. The chirping of crickets, the hoot of an owl, the rustling of leaves in the evening breeze. Each sound was a soft reminder of the quiet rhythm of life within the forest, life that I was now safely returning from. I quickened my pace, drawn by the ever stronger smell of wood smoke. As I crested a small rise, the village came into view. The flickering firelight, dancing on the rough-hewn shelters, looked like welcoming eyes against the darkening landscape. The sight filled me with a profound sense of gratitude. There were no grand structures, no lavish displays of wealth, just simple shelters huddled together, offering shelter and companionship, a testament to our collective strength and resilience. The sounds of laughter and chatter drifted on the evening breeze, a comforting melody that promised warmth and shared stories. A sense of anticipation built within me. I imagined the warmth of the fire on my chilled skin, the taste of roasted meat, the camaraderie of shared stories under the watchful eyes of the stars. The exhaustion of the day began to recede, replaced by a quiet excitement. I could already smell the roasting meat, a rich, savory scent that mingled with the wood smoke. As I approached the village, a familiar figure emerged from one of the shelters. An elder, their face etched with the wisdom of countless seasons, greeted me with a warm smile and a knowing glance. The smile, simple as it was, erased the last vestiges of my earlier fears. There was no need for words. The shared glance communicated everything: understanding, relief, and a silent acknowledgement of the day's challenges and the shared victory. I felt a wave of quiet contentment wash over me. The hardships of the day, the ever-present threat of danger, had made this moment of return all the more precious. I allowed myself a small, almost imperceptible smile, feeling a profound sense of belonging and gratitude, my worries fading into the twilight, leaving me with the peaceful hum of the firelight and the familiar comfort of the clan. The crackling fire warmed my face, chasing away the lingering chill of the forest. The scent of roasting meat mingled with the wood smoke, a comforting aroma that settled deep in my chest. I settled onto a rough-hewn log, the bark digging gently into my weary thighs. My muscles ached, a pleasant soreness that spoke of a day well spent, though the memory of the wolf's eyes still flickered in the periphery of my vision. Around me, the clan hummed with the low murmur of conversation, the rhythmic chewing of food, a counterpoint to the fire's crackle. But my attention was drawn to the old woman. She sat across the flames, her silhouette stark against the dancing light. In her lap, a collection of smooth gray stones lay nestled like sleeping birds. They were unlike any stones I'd seen before. Their surfaces were polished smooth by time and river, and intricate patterns, almost too fine to see, were etched into their surfaces. Her weathered fingers, gnarled and strong like the roots of an ancient tree, traced these patterns with a slow, deliberate grace. There was a stillness about her, a profound concentration that hushed even the murmuring of the others. Curiosity tugged at me. I watched her, fascinated, as she turned each stone slowly in her hands, her gaze distant, lost in the secrets held within the gray surfaces. The firelight glinted off her wrinkled face, highlighting the deep lines etched there by years spent under the sun and stars. Her eyes, though clouded with age, held a spark of something ancient, something that transcended the everyday struggles of our lives. I wondered about those stones. Were they tools, or were they something more? The thought sparked a deeper question. What stories did they hold? Did they whisper of ancestors long gone, of hunts and harvests, of triumphs and tragedies that shaped our clan? I imagined them as a silent record, each stone a chapter in a history older than any words I knew. The old woman's movements were almost ritualistic, her touch reverent, as if she were communicating with the spirits contained within the stones. The air around her seemed to vibrate with a quiet energy, a sense of history unfolding before me. I thought of the elder stories, the fragmented tales of our past, passed down through generations, each retelling slightly different, yet fundamentally the same. These stones felt like a tangible link to that past, a deeper, more silent narrative waiting to be discovered. Perhaps the patterns weren't merely decorative. Perhaps they were a language, a code only the old woman could decipher. The aroma of roasted meat brought me back to the present. The old woman paused, her fingers lingering on one particularly intricate stone, before placing it back with the others. She looked up, her gaze meeting mine for a fleeting moment, before she turned her attention back to the fire. A faint smile played on her lips. I couldn't tell if it was a smile of memory or perhaps a shared secret. The feeling was powerful and mysterious. The stones, in that moment, were not just inanimate objects, but portals to a forgotten time, to lives lived and lessons learned, silently waiting to be understood. The fire crackled, casting dancing shadows, and the quiet hum of the clan continued, but the weight of unspoken history hung heavy in the air.
The firelight danced across the old woman's face, etching deeper the lines etched by years of sun and wind. Her eyes, though clouded with age, held a spark of something ancient, something that seemed to reach beyond the flickering flames and into the very heart of the earth. The air hummed with the quiet crackle of the fire and the low murmurs of others around us, but it was the old woman's presence that held me captive. The smooth gray stones lay nestled in her lap, their surfaces reflecting the firelight like captured starlight. My own hunger was sated, the warmth of the fire a balm to my tired bones. Yet a different kind of hunger stirred within me,
a hunger for the stories held within those silent stones. I hesitated, unsure of the propriety of disturbing her quiet contemplation, but the urge to know their secrets was stronger than my hesitation. My voice, barely a whisper above the crackling fire, escaped my lips. "Grandmother," I began, the word feeling both reverent and clumsy. "Those stones, they are beautiful. What are they?" She looked up, a faint smile playing on her lips. The smile didn't reach her eyes, but it softened the harshness of her features, making her seem less like a figure carved from ancient rock, and more like the warm earth itself. She gently picked up one of the stones, turning it over in her calloused hands. Its surface was smooth, worn smooth by time, and perhaps by countless hands before mine. Etched into the stone were intricate lines, a network of symbols that seemed to shift and writhe in the flickering firelight. "These," she began, her voice a low rumble like the distant thunder, "are the stories of our people. They tell of the first hunt, the first harvest, the first fire." She traced one of the lines with a gnarled fingertip. "This," she murmured, "is the path of the great river, how it carved its way through the land, shaping our world." She spoke slowly, her words painting vivid pictures in my mind. I saw the river, a mighty serpent winding its way through the landscape, its current carving out valleys and mountains, shaping the very land we walked upon. I heard the echoes of the first hunt, the thrill of the chase, the satisfaction of the kill. I felt the warmth of the first fire, its flames banishing the darkness and offering hope in the cold night. She picked up another stone, this one smaller, its markings simpler. She said, "This tells of the great sickness that swept through our clan, taking many of our people. But it also shows how we endured, how we learned to survive, how we came back from the darkness." As she spoke, I felt a wave of empathy wash over me. The stories weren't just etched in stone. They were etched in the very fabric of our existence. They were a testament to the resilience of our people, a reminder of the hardships endured and the strength found within our community. These were not just symbols, they were echoes of our past, whispers of our ancestors, guides for our future. The old woman continued, moving from stone to stone, each one revealing a different aspect of our history. The tales weren't always triumphant. There were moments of loss, of struggle, of near destruction. But even in those darkest moments, there was a thread of hope, a testament to the unyielding spirit of our ancestors. She shared the stories with the same quiet intensity with which she had sharpened her tools for so many years. The fire crackled, casting long shadows that danced and swayed, mirroring the ebb and flow of her narrative. Finally, silence fell again, broken only by the gentle snap of burning wood. The old woman smiled once more, a deeper smile this time, her eyes mirroring the same quiet wisdom that permeated her words. She placed the stones back into her lap, the stories within them carefully guarded, waiting for another time to be told, another ear to listen. A sudden, sharp crackle from the fire, followed by a shower of sparks, jolted me awake. The peaceful reverie of the night, the gentle rhythm of the flames, was shattered. My eyes, still heavy with sleep, struggled to focus on the dancing orange light. The air, once warm and comforting, felt suddenly colder, a chill seeping into my bones. The crackle hadn't been a natural sound. It had been sharp, almost violent. A quick glance showed a large log had shifted, partially blocking the airflow, threatening to extinguish the precious flames that were our only defense against the encroaching night's chill. Panic, a cold knot in my stomach, tightened its grip. The fire was more than just warmth. It was our protector, a barrier against the wild things that prowled in the darkness. Without it, we were vulnerable, exposed. My hand instinctively reached for a nearby branch, a piece of wood I had set aside earlier, ready to feed the fire if needed. The embers glowed faintly, a fragile heart beating in the darkness. With a deep breath, I pushed myself up, the rough ground scratching against my skin. The scent of wood smoke, usually so comforting, now carried a note of urgency, a warning. The other members of the clan slept soundly, their breathing a soft, rhythmic counterpoint to the crackling fire. I didn't want to wake them unnecessarily. The task was mine, a silent responsibility I shouldered without a second thought. Carefully, I knelt beside the fire, the heat radiating a welcome warmth despite the growing unease. Using the branch, I gently nudged the log that had fallen across the flames. It shifted with a groan, a sound amplified in the stillness of the night, sending another flurry of sparks into the air. My heart pounded in my chest as I worked quickly, feeding smaller pieces of wood into the fire, coaxing the flames back to life. The process was slow, each carefully placed piece of wood seeming to take an eternity to catch light. The faint orange glow grew brighter, steadier, until a satisfying roar filled the small space. Relief washed over me in a wave, dissolving the tension that had held me captive. The warmth returned, chasing away the growing chill. I felt a deep satisfaction, a quiet pride in fulfilling my duty, in protecting the precious flame that represented our safety and our survival. As the fire burned brightly once more, I paused, letting my eyes adjust to the renewed light. I watched the shadows dance and shift, the familiar faces of my sleeping clanmates a testament to the shared security of our hearth. The sounds of the night, the rustle of leaves, the distant howl of a predator seemed less menacing now, dulled by the reassuring crackle of the fire. A strange calmness settled over me. The earlier panic subsided, replaced by a quiet sense of well-being, a feeling of having faced and overcome a small but vital challenge. The night, once a source of apprehension, now felt more like a shared slumber beneath the watchful eye of the stars. I settled back against the rock, the warmth of the fire against my back, and drifted back to sleep, the faint scent of wood smoke once again a comforting, familiar presence. The fire, once a roaring blaze, had dwindled to glowing embers, casting long, dancing shadows across the faces of my sleeping companions. The night air, once crisp and cold, now held a different quality. A faint, unfamiliar scent, like sweet berries and damp earth, drifted on the night air, stirring a flicker of curiosity and a low rumble in my belly, hinting at a potential food source nearby. Hunger, a constant companion, sharpened my senses. The familiar sounds of the night, the rustling leaves, the occasional hoot of an owl, faded into the background as this new, intriguing aroma took center stage. My heart beat a little faster, a primal instinct urging me to investigate. The thought of a plentiful meal, a respite from the gnawing emptiness in my stomach, was a powerful motivator. The risk, however, the possibility of encountering something dangerous in the darkness, was ever present. Yet the promise of nourishment outweighed the fear. Cautiously, I rose, the cool earth a welcome contrast to the warmth of the dying embers. The darkness was complete, broken only by the faint starlight filtering through the trees. I felt for my spear, the smooth, familiar wood, a source of comfort in this unfamiliar situation. Each step was deliberate, each breath measured. The scent, at first faint, grew stronger as I moved towards the edge of the clearing. It seemed to emanate from a small thicket of bushes, their leaves rustling softly in the night breeze. My hand tightened on the spear. Fear mingled with anticipation. What lay hidden within those shadows? Would it be a welcome addition to our meager food stores, or something far more dangerous? The thought of sharing the bounty with my clan spurred me on. The image of their tired faces, the hope in their eyes at the prospect of a full belly, fueled my resolve. I moved slowly, stealthily, my senses heightened. Every rustle, every snap of a twig sent a jolt of adrenaline through me. I pressed myself against a large rock, using it as cover, and peered into the shadows. My eyes, slowly adjusting to the darkness, began to discern shapes. Twisted branches, the dark outline of bushes, and something else. My breath hitched in my throat. Clusters of plump, dark berries, glistening with dew, hung heavy on the low-lying branches. They were unfamiliar to me, yet their sweet fragrance was unmistakable. Beneath them, I spotted a patch of roots, their earthy scent blending perfectly with the berries' sweetness. Relief washed over me, so intense it almost brought tears to my eyes. Hunger was a powerful force, but so too was the satisfaction of providing for my clan. Gently, I began to gather the berries, carefully selecting the ripest ones, placing them into my leather pouch. I then dug up some of the roots, careful not to damage them, placing them gently alongside the berries. The quiet satisfaction of this small victory was immense. This wasn't a grand hunt, nor a heroic deed, but it was a contribution nonetheless, a small act of providing. The weight of the berries and roots in my pouch felt heavier than any game I had ever carried. It was the weight of responsibility, the weight of care for my people, the weight of hope. I returned to the fire, the sweet smell of my discovery still lingering in the night air, my heart full and my belly rumbling a little less. The last embers of the fire sighed, relinquishing their fiery breath in a final, reluctant gasp. A chill, sharper than any I'd felt before, snaked through the rocks of our shelter, a tangible whisper of the encroaching night. It wasn't just cold, it felt predatory. The silence, usually a comforting blanket, now held a different weight, a tension that prickled my skin. The animals were still. Even the usual night sounds were hushed. My fingers, stiff and clumsy from the day's work, moved with a practiced care. I knelt by the dying embers, the heat already retreating, leaving behind only faint warmth on my cheek. The smell of wood smoke, once so comforting, was now fading, replaced by the sharp tang of the night air, redolent with the scent of damp earth and unseen things. A low moan, like the wind sighing through the trees, snaked its way into my ears. It was a sound that spoke of vast emptiness and unsettling unknowns. I carefully gathered the glowing coals, each one a tiny, fragile star threatened by the encroaching darkness. My breath plumed out before me, briefly visible in the failing light. The weight of responsibility settled on me, heavier than any deer I had ever hunted. This fire wasn't just warmth, it was life itself. It was protection against the cold, the wild animals, the unseen terrors that lurked in the shadows. It was the heart of our clan, beating slowly in the heart of the night. Finding a sheltered nook beneath a jutting rock, I gently placed the embers within a bed of dry leaves and grasses, shielding them from the wind's insistent breath. It was a delicate dance, a silent conversation between me and the dying fire. I added more tinder, small twigs and dried grasses I'd gathered earlier, working with a slow, deliberate patience that seemed to calm the gnawing anxiety within me. With each carefully placed piece of kindling, a sense of hope rekindled within me, a tiny spark mirroring the embers I was protecting. The faintest crackle, then a whisper of smoke, announced the fire's hesitant rebirth. A tiny flame flickered into existence, battling against the encroaching cold. I watched it with a quiet intensity, feeling a sense of accomplishment mixed with a profound relief. My tired body ached, but the fire's nascent warmth spread through me, chasing away the chill. I had faced the darkness, and for tonight at least, I had won. The rhythmic crackling of the newly born fire filled the silence, a counterpoint to the wind's mournful song. It was a small victory, but in this harsh world, small victories were everything. The faintest ember glow painted the inside of the rock shelter in shifting shades of orange and black. My breath plumed out, a small white cloud swallowed by the still night air. The sounds of the night were familiar, the whisper of wind through the cracks in the rock, the rustling of unseen creatures in the undergrowth. My body, heavy with the day's work and the long sleep, felt deeply relaxed. The warmth of the carefully preserved embers, a soothing balm against the night's chill. My mind, however, still clung to the events of the day. The tense chase, the unexpected encounter with the wolf, the relief of the shared meal. a sense of quiet contentment settled over me, a rare and precious moment of peace. Then a sound, sharp, piercing, a cry. It tore through the quiet night like a jagged shard of ice. My eyes snapped open, the embers suddenly harsh against my retinas. My heart hammered against my ribs, a frantic drumbeat in the silence. The cry was close, too close. It was a sound of distress, of raw, unadulterated fear. The hairs on the back of my neck prickled, a wave of primal instinct washing over me, overriding the lingering drowsiness. Panic warred with a deeper, protective instinct. My hand instinctively reached for the flint knife at my side, the smooth, cool stone, a comfort in the grip of sudden fear. The cry was repeated, this time closer, more desperate. It was a child's cry. My thoughts raced. Which child? What happened? Was it a predator? The thought of any harm befalling the young of our clan sent a fresh surge of fear through me, fueling my already racing heart. I pushed myself to a sitting position, the rough stone cold against my bare skin. The embers glowed dimly, their light failing to pierce the oppressive darkness beyond the shelter's mouth. With a deep breath to steady my nerves, I cautiously crawled towards the entrance, my knife held ready in my hand. Each inch was a struggle against the instinct to freeze, to remain hidden. But the child's cry fueled my movement, overriding the fear that threatened to paralyze me. As I peered out into the darkness, my eyes struggled to adjust. The moon was hidden behind a thick cloud cover, leaving the world shrouded in near total darkness. The smell of damp earth, pine needles, and something else, something sharp and animalistic, filled the air. Fear sharpened my senses. My hearing honed in on a low rustling sound coming from near the base of the large oak tree that shadowed our shelter. Cautiously, I moved closer, each step slow and deliberate. Through a gap in the undergrowth, I saw a small figure huddled at the base of the tree, its shoulders shaking with sobs. It was a young child, their face buried in their arms, a small wounded bird next to them. The cry that had jolted me awake had been a mixture of fear and pain, but now it was mostly just exhaustion. As I approached, the child looked up at me, eyes wide with fright and tears, but also relief. The bird I saw was injured but alive. The threat that had caused the child's cries appeared to have already fled. Slowly, carefully, I approached the child, offering a reassuring gesture, and gently picked up the small bird. Its wing was broken. I had to get the child and the bird back to the warmth of the fire, to the safety and care of the others. The child's cry, thin and reedy, cut through the night like a shard of ice. My heart hammered against my ribs, a frantic drumbeat in the sudden silence that followed. I scrambled to my feet, the embers of the fire casting long, dancing shadows that seemed to writhe like the fear coiling in my gut. The wind, a mournful sigh through the rocks, did little to soothe the urgent need to act. I pushed aside the animal hides that served as a rudimentary door to our shelter, the cold air biting at my skin, a stark contrast to the warmth I'd left behind. The child lay huddled near the base of the rock, small and still, a tiny bird clutched in its hand, its wing broken. Its whimpers were soft now, fading into the rustle of leaves in the night wind. The bird, a creature of vibrant colors during the day, now looked dull and lifeless in the gloom. A sharp pain sliced through my chest, a mixture of fear for the child and a deep sadness at the sight of the injured bird. The darkness pressed in, amplifying the silence, broken only by the occasional chirping of crickets. I knelt beside the child, my fingers gently probing its small arm, finding a shallow cut, already beginning to bleed. Suddenly, a hand rested lightly on my shoulder. It was the old woman, her presence as comforting as the warmth of the dying embers. Her eyes, deep set and knowing, held a mixture of concern and an ancient wisdom that calmed my frantic heart. She knelt beside us, the flickering firelight illuminating the lines etched onto her face, a testament to countless nights spent under the same watchful stars. She spoke softly, her voice a low murmur that seemed to weave itself into the fabric of the night. Her words were few, yet they held the weight of generations. She produced a small pouch from her worn leather bag, the scent of dried herbs filling the air, a calming blend of earthy smells that somehow eased the tension in my chest. Her fingers, gnarled with age, worked deftly, preparing a poultice. The gentle movement of her hands, her quiet concentration, was a balm to my anxious mind. With practiced ease, she cleaned the child's wound, applying the soothing herbs. The child's whimpers subsided, replaced by a soft sigh as the poultice's warmth eased the pain. The old woman then carefully examined the bird, her touch as gentle as a falling leaf. She hummed a low melodic tune, her voice barely audible above the wind, and I felt a wave of tranquility wash over me. She worked with an almost supernatural grace, her actions flowing seamlessly. The small bird, initially lifeless, stirred slightly under her touch. The old woman then spoke to me, telling of these herbs and of their healing properties passed down for countless generations, remedies discovered through trial and error, through careful observation of the natural world. The knowledge she possessed, I realized, transcended the practical. It was a bond with the earth, a deep understanding born of centuries of shared experience. It was a gift. With the child's wound tended and the bird nestled carefully in a bed of soft leaves, a sense of profound calm settled over me. The old woman's wisdom, the soothing herbs, the quiet strength she embodied, all of it had soothed the frantic fear that had gripped me moments before. The night, though still dark and full of unseen dangers, felt less threatened somehow, now that we had faced this small crisis together, a shared experience under the silent, watchful eyes of the stars.
The old woman's hands moved with practiced ease, her fingers deftly crushing the leaves between her calloused palms. The scent of wood smoke, already familiar and comforting from the fire, now mingled with a sharper, sweeter aroma, the pungent, earthy smell of the herbs she was preparing. It wasn't unpleasant, this new addition to the familiar smell of the fire, but it held a curious intensity that pricked at something deep within me. It was a smell, familiar, a smell that resonated with a forgotten memory, buried under layers of harsh realities and countless sunrises. The child, small and whimpering, lay nestled in a makeshift bed of soft furs. Their small injured wing was carefully bandaged,
the old woman humming a low, repetitive tune as she worked. The rhythm was soothing, a calming counterpoint to the child's whimpers and the crackling fire. I watched her, mesmerized, the scent of the herbs growing stronger, more insistent. Then it hit me, a sudden sharp pang of memory, a flood of sensations that washed over me like a cold wave. I was much younger then, perhaps no older than the injured child. A sickness had gripped me, a relentless fever that had sapped my strength, leaving me weak and delirious. I remembered the same smell, the same earthy sweetness cutting through the heavy smell of illness and fear in the small rock shelter. My mother, or perhaps it was the old woman herself back then, had used these very same herbs, their scent mingling with the smoke from the fire, creating a familiar, comforting cocoon around me. The memory was fragmented, a series of blurry images and sensations. The warmth of my mother's hand on my forehead, the gentle rocking that lulled me towards a feverish sleep, the constant, nagging worry in her voice, a muted hum that was barely audible above the crackling fire. But the scent, the sharp, earthy sweetness of those herbs was indelible. It was a tangible link to a time before the relentless demands of adulthood, before the constant struggle for survival, a time when the world seemed simpler, when fear was tempered by the unwavering protection of my clan. It was bittersweet, this memory, a nostalgic longing for a time that was lost, yet tinged with a deep gratitude for the enduring strength and wisdom that had carried me through. The herbs, then as now, represented more than just medicinal plants. They were symbols of care, resilience, and the enduring strength of the clan. The old woman's humming continued, a low, steady rhythm that seemed to echo the ancient heartbeat of our community, a continuity that spans generations, stretching from my childhood illness to this present moment of shared concern. The flickering firelight danced on her face, casting an ethereal glow upon her weathered features, highlighting the countless stories etched into her face, stories that mirrored my own journey through time. The memory was fragmented, a series of blurry images and sensations. The warmth of my mother's hand on my forehead, the gentle rocking that lulled me towards a feverish sleep, the constant, nagging worry in her voice, a muted hum that was barely audible above the crackling fire. But the scent, the sharp, earthy sweetness of those herbs was indelible. It was a tangible link to a time before the relentless demands of adulthood, before the constant struggle for survival. A time when the world seemed simpler, when fear was tempered by the unwavering protection of my clan. It was bittersweet, this memory, a nostalgic longing for a time that was lost, yet tinged with a deep gratitude for the enduring strength and wisdom that had carried me through. The herbs, then as now, represented more than just medicinal plants. They were symbols of care, resilience, and the enduring strength of the clan. The old woman's humming continued, a low, steady rhythm that seemed to echo the ancient heartbeat of our community, a continuity that spans generations, stretching from my childhood illness to this present moment of shared concern. The flickering firelight danced on her face, casting an ethereal glow upon her weathered features, highlighting the countless stories etched into her face, stories that mirrored my own journey through time. The child's whimpers subsided, replaced by a shallow, regular breathing. The old woman finished tending the wounds, her movements slow and deliberate, each action imbued with a quiet confidence that radiated outward, calming the child and me. The scent of herbs and wood smoke remained, a comforting blanket against the night, a tangible reminder that even in the darkest hours, the warmth of the clan and the memory of its enduring strength always remained. A sudden, sharp crack of thunder rolled across the sky, momentarily eclipsing the crackling fire and casting long, dancing shadows that rippled across the faces of the sleeping clan members. The sound was visceral, a deep, resonant boom that vibrated through the ground and up into my bones, jolting me from my peaceful reverie. The fire, just moments before a comforting friend, now seemed a fragile flicker against the overwhelming power of the storm. My breath hitched in my chest. The sudden darkness, punctuated only by the erratic flashes of lightning, felt oppressive. The air, previously still and warm, was now thick with the scent of ozone, sharp and electric. The familiar sounds of the night, the rustle of leaves, the chirping of crickets, were swallowed by the storm's roar. It felt as though the very earth itself was trembling. Fear, sharp and immediate, pricked at the edges of my consciousness. This wasn't the gentle rumble of distant thunder that sometimes punctuated the quiet evenings. This was something else entirely. A raw, untamed force that dwarfed even the most fearsome predator. I glanced around at the sleeping forms huddled near the fire. Their faces, normally etched with the lines of hardship and resilience, were now softened by sleep, their breaths slow and even. The vulnerability of their slumber was a stark contrast to the untamed power raging outside. Instinctively, I reached out and adjusted the animal skins that covered the sleeping child beside me, pulling them tighter against the sudden chill that had swept through the air. The child stirred slightly, a soft whimper escaping their lips, but they didn't fully awaken. I felt a surge of protective instinct, a primal urge to shield them from the storm's fury. My eyes, now fully adjusted to the darkness, scanned the area around the fire. The embers, usually vibrant and glowing, were now reduced to a dull, flickering glow. The wind, whipped into a frenzy by the storm, threatened to extinguish them entirely. I knew that losing the fire would be disastrous. It was our only defense against the night's chill, a symbol of our survival and our shared strength. With a surge of adrenaline, I gathered some dry brush and carefully added it to the flames, coaxing them back to life. The crackling sound, though now amplified by the storm's fury, was a comfort, a reassuring counterpoint to the thunder's roar. As the flames flared higher, casting a warmer glow on the faces of the sleeping clan, a sense of quiet resolve settled over me. The storm's power was immense, but it wouldn't break us. We had faced worse, and we would face this as well. The cyclical nature of life, of seasons and storms, settled in my heart. This too shall pass. We would survive the night, just as we had survived countless others, our resilience a testament to our shared strength and the enduring spirit of our clan. The rhythmic crackle of the fire, now strengthened against the thunder, became a heartbeat, a lullaby in the face of the storm. The wind howled a mournful song, rattling the stones that formed the roof of our shelter. Rain lashed against the entrance, a relentless drumming that had lulled most of the clan into a deep sleep. But I couldn't rest. The storm, fierce as it was not what held my attention. A faint, rhythmic scratching sound near the entrance, punctuated by the occasional soft thud, drew my attention away from the tempest. It was a sound both unsettling and familiar, the kind of sound that stirs a primal instinct, a protective urge deep within. My heart hammered against my ribs. The scratching persisted, a persistent gnawing at the edges of my consciousness. It wasn't the wind. This was deliberate, methodical. Fear, cold and sharp, pierced the dull ache of exhaustion. I shifted slightly, my hand instinctively reaching for the flint-tipped spear resting beside me. The fire, reduced to a bed of glowing embers, cast long, dancing shadows that distorted the familiar shapes of the rock walls. The thuds became more frequent, accompanied by a low, guttural snuffling sound. My breath hitched in my throat. What creature dared approach our shelter during a storm? A wild boar, perhaps, driven mad by the elements? Or something worse? The thought sent a shiver down my spine. My senses sharpened, focusing on the sounds, the smells, the faint vibrations that traveled through the ground. Cautiously I rose, my muscles protesting the sudden movement. The air was thick with the smell of rain and damp earth, a familiar scent, but tonight it carried an undercurrent of something else, something musky, animalistic. I crept towards the entrance, my spear held ready, my body tense, poised to spring into action. The scratching intensified, the thudding grew louder, closer. Peeking through a crack between the rocks, I strained to see through the downpour. The darkness was almost absolute, punctuated only by the occasional flash of lightning. Then, in the brief illumination of a lightning strike, I saw it. A small shape huddled close to the shelter's entrance, a young child, shivering and soaked to the bone. He was clutching a small, whimpering creature to his chest, a young wolf cub, its fur plastered to its body. Relief washed over me, immediate and profound. Fear gave way to compassion. The child, likely separated from his family during the storm, had sought refuge near our shelter. The rhythmic scratching, the sound of his small hands scraping against the rock face. The thuds were the cub striking against the rocks as it struggled to stay warm. I quickly moved to open a wider gap in the rocks, carefully sliding aside enough stone to allow the child and the cub to enter. The child looked up at me, his eyes wide and filled with fear and exhaustion. He didn't speak, but his silent gratitude was palpable. He carefully and protectively snuggled the injured cub closer to his body. I gently guided them deeper into the shelter, closer to the warmth of the dying embers. The child looked so small, so vulnerable, but his eyes held a fierce determination. He was still trembling violently as I pulled my own animal skin closer around his tiny frame and pulled him towards the fire. I knew that we would have to look for the cub's parents and the child's family once the storm subsided. But for now, they were safe. The sense of relief and the warm glow of the embers spread through my own weary body.
The drumming of the rain on the rock shelter's roof had slowed to a gentle patter. The storm, a furious beast moments ago, was retreating, leaving behind a world washed clean and shimmering under the newly emerged stars.
The air, thick with the scent of wet earth and pine, was sharp and clean, a stark contrast to the smoky haze of the firelight. It was a scent I knew intimately, the scent of the forest, the scent of the hunt. The memory hit me like a physical blow, the adrenaline still lingering in my muscles despite the exhaustion that weighed heavily on my bones. The wolf, the image of its tawny fur, its eyes burning with hunger and menace, flashed before my eyes. The rasp of its breath, the low growl, the terrifying nearness of its fangs. Even now, a chill prickled my skin. I could almost feel the tremor in my hands as I'd raised my spear, the desperate hope clinging to me like a lifeline. The memory wasn't just fear, though. There was something else mixed in there, a strange exhilaration, a thrill of survival, a grudging respect for the power and grace of the predator I'd faced. The nearness of death, the sheer weight of the moment, had etched itself into my being. It was a stark contrast to the sleepy comfort of the shelter, the gentle warmth of the fire, the familiar sounds of my clanmates breathing in their sleep. I shifted slightly, the rough texture of the animal hide beneath me a familiar comfort. My muscles ached, a dull throb echoing the rhythmic drip of water from the shelter's roof. The fire, diligently tended, cast dancing shadows on the walls, and I watched as the embers glowed, a tiny heart beating in the darkness. The rhythmic crackling was a comforting counterpoint to the quiet murmurs and soft breaths of those around me. The old woman stirred beside me, her breathing slow and even. She was a fountain of knowledge, a living history of our clan. The way she'd calmly dealt with the injured child and wolf cub earlier, it spoke volumes. Her skill with those herbs, her quiet competence, the way she held herself even in the storm's fury, all of it was an unspoken testament to years of facing the harsh realities of our lives. My gaze drifted to the fire, the embers glowing like tiny stars mirroring those outside. I thought of the deer, the fleeting glimpse of its magnificent antlers, the swiftness of its flight. The hunt had been unsuccessful, but the experience itself, the heightened senses, the test of skill and instinct, it was a necessary part of our existence. We were all hunters and gatherers, each of us playing a vital role in the delicate balance of survival. The rain had almost completely stopped. The only sound now, the gentle whispering of the wind through the trees. A quiet settled over the shelter, a peaceful hush that only the wilderness could provide. I closed my eyes, the scent of wet earth and pine still sharp in my nostrils. The day's events replayed themselves in my mind, a reel of images and sensations. The hunt, the fear, the relief, the storm, the quiet tending of the fire, the injured child, the old woman's wisdom. It was a day like any other, yet deeply etched in my memory. Tomorrow would bring new challenges, new hunts, new struggles. But for now, there was only the quiet embrace of sleep. The faintest wisp of smoke, carrying with it a sweetness I couldn't place, stirred me from sleep. It wasn't the familiar scent of our own fire, which had long since died down to embers. This was different, unfamiliar, tinged with something floral, something fruity. My eyes flickered open, the darkness of the rock shelter still clinging to me. The air was noticeably cooler than it had been a few hours before. A chill had settled in, and I pulled the animal hides tighter around my shoulders. The sound of the wind whispering through the cracks in the rock was the only other thing besides the unfamiliar smell that had roused me. It wasn't a harsh wind, more like a soft sigh against the stone. My body ached, a familiar weariness settling deep in my bones after the long day of hunting. Yet this new scent, this hint of something else beyond the familiar smells of our Stone Age world, piqued my curiosity more than the exhaustion could quell. I sat up, the rough rock scratching against my skin. The embers of the fire glowed dimly, barely enough light to see my hands. I crept to the entrance of the shelter, pushing aside the animal hide that served as a crude door. The pre-dawn light was just beginning to paint the sky with a faint gray hue. The air outside was crisp, carrying with it the damp smell of the earth. But that unfamiliar sweetness lingered, stronger now. It seemed to be coming from the direction of the forest. Cautiously, I stepped outside, my feet sinking slightly into the soft earth. The chill of the morning air was a stark contrast to the warmth I'd left behind. I could hear the rustling of leaves in the nearby trees, the occasional chirp of a bird, the usual sounds of the awakening forest. But it was that other scent, that sweet, unfamiliar aroma, mixed with a hint of wood smoke, that dominated my senses. My hand instinctively went to the flint spearhead attached to my hunting spear. A sliver of unease pricked at me. I didn't know what to expect. What might be the source of this strange smell? Was it a sign of danger? Or was it something else? Something good? Following the subtle sweetness, I moved deeper into the forest. Each step was deliberate, my senses heightened. The undergrowth was damp beneath my feet, the air thick with the scent of pine needles and damp earth. The trees loomed tall around me, their branches intertwined, creating a dim, almost reverent atmosphere. The sweet smell intensified as I drew closer to a small clearing. And there it was. A small fire, separate from our own, burned brightly in the center of the clearing, the flames dancing against the backdrop of the rising sun. But it wasn't the fire itself that caused my jaw to drop. Surrounding the fire were several figures I didn't recognize. People from another clan, perhaps? They were gathered around a tripod over which hung a large pot, steaming with what I now realized was the source of the sweet, unfamiliar scent, some kind of fruit stew. The aroma was intoxicating, a delicious mixture of berries and something else, something spicy and sweet that I'd never encountered before. They seemed to be celebrating. Laughter and quiet conversation drifted on the morning air. Watching them, I felt a curious mixture of fear and fascination.
The faintest wisp of smoke, carrying with it a sweetness I couldn't place, stirred me from sleep. It wasn't the familiar scent of our own fire, which had long since died down to embers. This was different, unfamiliar, tinged with something floral, something fruity. My eyes flickered open, the darkness of the rock shelter still clinging to me. The air was noticeably cooler than it had been a few hours before. A chill had settled in, and I pulled the animal hides tighter around my shoulders. The sound of the wind whispering through the cracks in the rock was the only other thing besides the unfamiliar smell that had roused me.
It wasn't a harsh wind, more like a soft sigh against the stone. My body ached, a familiar weariness settling deep in my bones after the long day of hunting. Yet this new scent, this hint of something else beyond the familiar smells of our Stone Age world, piqued my curiosity more than the exhaustion could quell. I sat up, the rough rock scratching against my skin. The embers of the fire glowed dimly, barely enough light to see my hands. I crept to the entrance of the shelter, pushing aside the animal hide that served as a crude door. The pre-dawn light was just beginning to paint the sky with a faint gray hue. The air outside was crisp, carrying with it the damp smell of the earth, but that unfamiliar sweetness lingered, stronger now. It seemed to be coming from the direction of the forest. Cautiously, I stepped outside, my feet sinking slightly into the soft earth. The chill of the morning air was a stark contrast to the warmth I'd left behind. I could hear the rustling of leaves in the nearby trees, the occasional chirp of a bird, the usual sounds of the awakening forest. But it was that other scent, that sweet, unfamiliar aroma mixed with a hint of wood smoke that dominated my senses. My hand instinctively went to the flint spearhead attached to my hunting spear. A sliver of unease pricked at me. I didn't know what to expect. What might be the source of this strange smell? Was it a sign of danger? Or was it something else? Something good? Following the subtle sweetness, I moved deeper into the forest. Each step was deliberate, my senses heightened. The undergrowth was damp beneath my feet, the air thick with the scent of pine needles and damp earth. The trees loomed tall around me, their branches intertwined, creating a dim, almost reverent atmosphere. The sweet smell intensified as I drew closer to a small clearing. And there it was. A small fire, separate from our own, burned brightly in the center of the clearing, the flames dancing against the backdrop of the rising sun. But it wasn't the fire itself that caused my jaw to drop. Surrounding the fire were several figures I didn't recognize. People from another clan, perhaps? They were gathered around a tripod, over which hung a large pot, steaming with what I now realized was the source of the sweet, unfamiliar scent. Some kind of fruit stew. The aroma was intoxicating, a delicious mixture of berries and something else, something spicy and sweet that I'd never encountered before. They seemed to be celebrating. Laughter and quiet conversation drifted on the morning air. Watching them, I felt a curious mixture of fear and fascination.
The air hung heavy with the scent of wood smoke, a familiar comfort laced with the unfamiliar sweetness that had drawn me to this hidden clearing. The fire in the strangers' encampment crackled merrily, casting dancing shadows on their faces. They were huddled close, their forms barely visible in the flickering light, speaking in low tones I couldn't understand. But their language, whatever it was suddenly silenced. A piercing cry shattered the night's quiet, a child's cry, sharp and filled with terror. It cut through me like a flint blade, a raw, primal sound that resonated deep within my chest. My heart hammered against my ribs, a frantic drumbeat against the stillness. My hand instinctively went to the haft of my spear, the smooth, familiar wood, a small comfort in the sudden surge of adrenaline. Cautious concern warred with instinct. Should I intervene?
These were strangers, their customs unknown, their intentions unclear. But the child's cry was a desperate plea, echoing the vulnerability I knew so well from my own clan. The image of my own younger sibling, their face pale with fever, flashed through my mind. The memories were strong and vivid despite the passage of time. I shifted my weight, a subtle movement intended to avoid drawing attention. My eyes scanned the faces around the fire. Fear and confusion rippled through their expressions, a shared unease mirrored in their hushed movements. Some glanced towards the source of the cry, their gazes darting nervously. Others shielded the fire with their bodies, as though trying to hide it from some unseen threat. The embers of their fire now seemed to flicker in response to the nervous energy in the air. The cries subsided into whimpers, then silence. A silence even more unsettling than the initial scream. My breath hitched in my throat, a knot of anxiety tightening in my chest. The strangeness of their customs and the language barrier seemed to fade into insignificance, overtaken by a more urgent instinct, the need to protect another life, a life that sounded so much like my own long ago. Hesitantly, I took a step forward, my spear held loosely at my side. The smell of damp earth and wood smoke was now tainted by a sharp, metallic scent, blood. A low murmur rippled through the strangers as several of them moved towards a cluster of rough-hewn shelters at the edge of the encampment. I followed their movements from behind a large rock, the rough surface a shield against my own anxieties, seeking a clear view of the situation without being seen myself. The crackling of the fire seemed louder against the growing apprehension. The uncertainty tugged at me, the risk of being discovered, the potential for danger. Yet the child's cry, the unspoken plea, resonated powerfully, overriding my apprehension. They were just as vulnerable, as helpless as we often were. The memory of my own clan's shared struggles against adversity spurred me. We needed each other. The next move, I knew, must be cautious and deliberate, my survival instincts and innate empathy working together. A single ember from their fire glowed brightly in the darkness, casting a long, slender shadow that seemed to reach out to me in invitation and understanding. Even in the fear and uncertainty, there was a profound connection in our shared humanity, a silent understanding of shared struggles against the wild.
The shared silence, heavy and thick with unspoken understanding. The crackling fire, a vibrant heart in the darkness, was the only witness to this silent meeting between strangers. The air, still thick with the scent of wood smoke and damp earth, held a new note, a faint, sweet tang that seemed to emanate from the other group's fire. I watched them, their faces etched with the same weariness and resilience I felt myself. Their clothes, though different in style from our own, spoke of the same harsh realities, patched and mended, bearing the marks of countless days spent battling the elements.
A small child, its face smudged with dirt, but its eyes bright with curiosity, crept closer to the fire. It reached out a small, trembling hand towards a roasting piece of something I couldn't quite make out. The adult beside it, the mother, I presumed, gently pushed the child's hand back, a look of both concern and caution in her eyes. I understood. Distrust was a necessary instinct, as ingrained in our lives as the need to find food and water. We all carry the memory of conflict, the scars of past battles, the unspoken fear of the unknown. Yet, in this shared silence around the flames, I felt something shift. The embers glowed, casting flickering shadows that danced across the faces of these strangers, revealing a kinship despite the difference in our appearances and customs. I remembered the lean times, the days when our own supplies had dwindled. I recalled the gratefulness in the eyes of someone who had shared their meager portion of food with us. The memory warmed me, both literally and metaphorically. In the flickering firelight, the piece of dried deer meat I carried in my pouch felt heavy in my hand. It wasn't much, a small offering in the face of so much uncertainty, but it was all I had to give. Hesitantly, I rose, holding the meat out towards the woman. My movement broke the silence. The gesture was simple, devoid of words, yet it carried the weight of my intentions. It was a peace offering, a bridge across the chasm of our unfamiliarity, a recognition that we both existed under the same unforgiving yet beautiful sky. The woman, surprised but not unfriendly, reached out and took the meat. Her fingers brushed mine, a fleeting contact, yet significant. In that brief touch, I saw a reflection of shared experience, a silent acknowledgement of our mutual struggle for survival. A slow smile touched her lips, a small gesture that spoke volumes in the quiet night. The child's eyes, wide and expectant, followed the movement of the meat. The simple act of sharing, of offering a small kindness, had transcended the boundaries of language and tribe. We were united, at least for a moment, in the common bond of human survival, our differences fading into the background as the quiet glow of the fire linked our two small groups, bringing the hope that this would not be our last meeting. The warmth of the shared fire, the simple act of sharing food, fostered a feeling of solidarity, a step towards understanding. And for a fleeting moment, fear was replaced by a shared sense of hope. The fire crackled, a counterpoint to the shared silence between myself and the stranger. The air, thick with the scent of wood smoke and the unfamiliar sweetness of the herbs, hung heavy. We sat, two figures silhouetted against the dancing flames, each lost in their own thoughts, yet bound by a fragile thread of unspoken understanding. The offering of the dried meat had been a small gesture, yet it seemed to have bridged a chasm. The stranger accepted it with a nod, a subtle movement that spoke volumes more than words ever could. Then it started, a faint rhythmic drumming. Not the sharp crack of a branch or the frantic beating of a bird's wings, but something deeper, more resonant. It pulsed through the stillness, a low, insistent beat that seemed to emanate from the heart of the forest itself. My hand instinctively went to the spear at my side. The stranger too shifted, their body tensing, their gaze drifting towards the shadowed depths of the woods. The drumming grew stronger, each beat carrying with it a strange vibration that resonated in my chest. It was a sound both ancient and unsettling, a primal rhythm that stirred something deep within me, a sense of unease mingling with a profound curiosity. Was it a warning, a celebration, or something else entirely? The stranger and I exchanged a look, a silent acknowledgement of the shared mystery. The scent of wood smoke seemed to fade, replaced by a more pungent, earthy aroma, something wild and untamed. The darkness beyond the firelight seemed to deepen, the shadows stretching like grasping fingers. I strained my ears, trying to discern the source of the drumming. Was it close? Far away? The rhythm remained steady, relentless, a hypnotic pulse that seemed to draw me further into the forest's embrace. My breath hitched in my throat. My heart beat in time with the drumming. My gaze followed the strangers. They seemed to be as entranced as I was. This wasn't the fear of a predator. This was something different. This was a primal fascination, a deep instinctive response to something both awe-inspiring and terrifying. The stranger slowly rose, their hand reaching for a crudely fashioned club that rested beside them. I did the same, my hand gripping my spear with a force that surprised me. We stood, poised, two figures silhouetted against the firelight, bound together by the unseen force that pulsed from the darkness. The drumming reached a crescendo, then slowly began to fade. Silence descended once more, but it was a different silence now, charged with anticipation. The air itself seemed to hum, the unseen presence hanging heavy in the space between the fire and the forest's edge. The stranger turned to me, their face partially hidden by shadow, yet I could sense their apprehension mirroring my own. We were both listening, watching, waiting. The unspoken question hung in the air. What would emerge from the darkness? The smell of earth and damp leaves now hung strong.
The drumming continued, a low, persistent pulse in the darkness. It was unsettling, a rhythm that felt both ancient and ominous. The stranger beside me shifted, a barely perceptible movement in the gloom. We hadn't spoken, not a word since the offering of the dried meat, but a shared unease hung heavy between us, a silent acknowledgement of the unknown that lay beyond the firelight. The air, thick with the smell of wood smoke and damp earth, suddenly held another scent, something sweeter, more delicate. It was faint at first, a whisper carried on a gentle breeze. Ripe berries, their sweetness a sharp contrast to the earthy smells of the forest. The scent grew stronger, pulling us both towards the edge of the clearing. The drumming faded slightly, replaced by the rustling of leaves and the chirping of crickets. My stomach rumbled, a low growl of hunger that echoed the stranger's own. I could tell by the subtle tightening of their stomach muscles, visible even under their worn clothing. We moved as one, our steps cautious, our senses heightened.
The scent led us deeper into the forest's edge, the darkness thickening around us. The air grew cooler, the dampness clinging to our skin. Overhead, the stars were bright, offering little comfort against the looming shadows of the trees. The path was barely visible, a faint track worn into the undergrowth. Fallen leaves crunched softly under our feet, the sound echoing unnaturally loud in the stillness. The scent of berries intensified, becoming almost overpowering. I could taste them already, the sweetness promising relief from the gnawing emptiness in my belly. My companion paused, their hand reaching out to touch a low-hanging branch heavy with leaves. The movement was subtle, almost imperceptible, yet the shared understanding hung in the air, unspoken. We were both hunters, and we both understood the thrill of the chase, the anticipation of the reward. As we pushed deeper into the undergrowth, I caught sight of them, patches of deep, crimson berries nestled amongst the leaves. They were plentiful, a bounty hidden amongst the shadows. The stranger reached out a hand, plucking a handful of berries, their fingers stained crimson in the darkness. They held out some towards me, a silent offering. I accepted, feeling a strange sense of camaraderie, a bond forged not in words, but in shared need and the silent language of survival. The taste was exquisite, a burst of sweetness that washed over my palate, chasing away the lingering chill and the gnawing hunger. We ate in silence, our eyes scanning the surrounding darkness. The rhythmic drumming from deeper in the forest was still faintly audible, but now it held a different quality. It was less threatening, more distant, overshadowed by the sweet taste of the berries. It was a reminder of the precariousness of our existence, but also a testament to our resilience, a reminder that even in the darkest night, nourishment could be found. The berries represented more than just food. They were a symbol of shared hope, a promise of sustenance, a silent treaty born of mutual need and a fleeting moment of peace in the heart of the wilderness. We continued to eat, our shared silent meal a testament to the quiet grace of survival.
The air, thick with the scent of damp earth and ripe berries, hung heavy between us. The stranger, a woman with eyes as dark and deep as the forest itself, and I stood frozen, our shared foraging forgotten. A low, guttural growl, raw and menacing, ripped through the quiet. It wasn't the chirping of birds or the rustle of leaves. This was something else entirely, something large, something hungry. The sweet smell of berries was instantly replaced by a primal scent of musk and damp fur. My hand instinctively went to the haft of my spear, the rough-hewn wood familiar and comforting in the sudden surge of adrenaline. The woman moved with a fluid grace that belied her strength, her hand already resting on a club carved from a heavy branch. Her eyes, previously soft with shared understanding, were now narrowed, assessing the undergrowth with a practiced intensity. We didn't speak, didn't need to. The shared language of survival, honed over generations, passed between us silently. The growl came again, closer this time, accompanied by the snapping of twigs, deliberate, measured movements. Something was stalking us, closing in. A prickling fear, cold and sharp, snaked up my spine.
It wasn't the fear of a deer or a wolf, the kind I knew how to manage. This was deeper, more primal, the instinctive terror of facing an unseen predator in the heart of its territory. My breath hitched in my chest, shallow and ragged. The muscles in my arms tightened, my grip on the spear growing firmer. I could feel the woman's tension beside me, a palpable wave of apprehension radiating from her. The berries we'd gathered lay forgotten at our feet, a stark reminder of our momentary peace. Now, only survival mattered. We stood poised, motionless, our senses straining to pierce the dense foliage. Every rustle, every snap of a twig sent jolts of apprehension through us. The silence stretched, taut and unbearable, broken only by the erratic thump of my own heart. The air itself seemed to vibrate with anticipation. Then a movement, a flash of dark fur, a glimpse of sharp teeth. The predator revealed itself. It was a large boar, its tusks gleaming menacingly in the dappled sunlight that filtered through the trees. It stood there, snorting, its eyes fixed on us, assessing its prey. The tension didn't ease, it merely shifted. Instead of a silent, unseen threat, we faced a tangible, brutal opponent. But facing it together, shoulder to shoulder, the primal fear lessened slightly. The shared understanding returned, this time forged not in the quiet gathering of berries, but in the face of shared danger. The woman's eyes, though still wary, held a spark of grim determination. We were ready.
The air crackled, thick with the scent of damp earth and pine. The rhythmic drumming had ceased, replaced by an uneery silence, broken only by the frantic thumping of my own heart. Then a sudden blinding flash of lightning. It ripped across the darkening sky, illuminating the clearing in a stark white light. For a heart-stopping moment, everything was crystal clear. The boar, massive and imposing, stood revealed. But something else caught my eye, something that instantly shifted the balance of fear within me. A deep, ragged gash, ugly and raw, marred its flank. The injury was significant, a clear sign of a prior fight, perhaps a struggle with another predator. The boar was weakened, its aggressive stance less certain, its movements slower, less menacing. The stranger beside me let out a soft breath, the sound barely audible above the sudden patter of rain that had begun to fall. The storm, it seemed, was as surprised as we were by the boar's appearance. The lightning had revealed not only the boar's injury, but also the immediate lay of the land. We were both close to a cluster of large rocks, offering some cover if needed. The intense white light had faded, leaving behind a lingering impression of the boar's vulnerable state. The darkness seemed less threatening now, less absolute. My hand instinctively tightened around the haft of my spear, but the grip was less frantic, less driven by raw terror. The cautious assessment had begun. The boar's breathing was heavy, labored. It shifted its weight, a tremor running through its massive frame. Was it wounded enough? Could we take it? Or was it merely biding its time, conserving its strength? The stranger beside me mirrored my own hesitant movements. We remained motionless, exchanging a silent communication,
a language understood through shared experience, a silent acknowledgement of the risk and reward. The rain intensified, each drop a cold percussion on the leaves overhead. The smell of petrichor, the earthy scent of rain on dry ground, filled the air. It was a different smell from the forest's usual dampness, sharper, cleaner. The boar snorted, a sound like tearing cloth, and I flinched. But it didn't charge. It simply stood there, the rain plastering its coarse fur to its body. I could almost hear its internal struggle, the conflict between primal instinct and physical limitation. The stranger subtly shifted their weight, their hand resting lightly on the crude knife strapped to their thigh. We remained perfectly still, our senses hyper-alert. The rain continued to fall, a steady, rhythmic drumbeat against the silence. The smell of petrichor, the earthy scent of rain on dry ground, filled the air. It was a different smell from the forest's usual dampness, sharper, cleaner. The boar snorted, a sound like tearing cloth, and I flinched. But it didn't charge. It simply stood there, the rain plastering its coarse fur to its body. I could almost hear its internal struggle, the conflict between primal instinct and physical limitation. The stranger subtly shifted their weight, their hand resting lightly on the crude knife strapped to their thigh. We remained perfectly still, our senses hyper-alert. The rain continued to fall, a steady, rhythmic drumbeat against the silence. I could feel the tension easing slightly, not disappearing entirely, but receding to a more manageable level. The primal fear was still there, a constant hum beneath the surface, but a new feeling was rising to meet it, a cautious optimism, a sense of calculated hope. The immediate, overwhelming terror was replaced by a strategic evaluation. The injury to the boar tilted the odds significantly. We stood, two figures silhouetted against the storm, sharing a silent understanding in the face of a potential threat transformed by circumstance into a calculated risk. We weren't just observing a danger, we were beginning to strategize. The rain washed the blood from the boar's flank, revealing the full extent of the injury, further confirming our advantage. The storm, the darkness, the very air itself seemed to hold its breath, waiting, as we did, for the next move.
The boar, its movements hampered by the visible wound, lumbered away, disappearing into the dense undergrowth. Silence descended, heavier now, thick with the scent of damp earth and pine needles, punctuated only by the rustling of unseen creatures. The stranger, a woman with eyes as dark and deep as the forest itself, turned to me. Her gaze lingered on my spear, its shaft worn smooth by countless hunts, the flint head chipped and dulled with use. A flicker of something, understanding perhaps, crossed her face. From her own pack, she produced a knife. Not just any knife, but a thing of beauty. The flint blade, meticulously shaped, gleamed with a sharp, almost unnerving precision. The handle, crafted from polished bone, felt warm and smooth in my hand as she offered it to me. "For your spear," she murmured, her voice low and husky, barely audible above the whispering wind. I accepted the knife, my fingers tracing the delicate curves of the bone handle. It was a far cry from my own crude tool.
The craftsmanship was exquisite, the blade sharper than any I'd ever seen. A wave of respect and something akin to envy washed over me. "Thank you," I replied, my voice equally soft. The word felt inadequate to express the gratitude I felt for this unexpected gift. Silence fell again, but it wasn't the strange silence of the moment before. This was a shared silence, comfortable and expectant. She gestured towards the knife, a silent invitation to examine it further. I turned it in my hands, admiring the precision of the flint work. The craftsmanship spoke of years of practice, of knowledge passed down through generations. "My elder," I began, remembering the hours spent learning from our clan's old toolmaker, watching the precise movements of their hands, the concentration etched on their weathered face. "He taught me much, but I am still learning." I gestured to my own spear, the worn wood a testament to both skill and the inevitable wear of constant use. There was shame in its worn state, a tacit acknowledgement of my own shortcomings in comparison to hers. She nodded slowly, a wistful smile playing on her lips. Mine, too. He showed me how to balance weight and edge, how to read the stone, to understand its strength and its weakness. These skills, she gestured to the knife, are not easily learned. We fell into a comfortable conversation, both of us speaking of our elders, their wisdom and patience, the countless lessons learned under their watchful eyes. It wasn't just about the skill of tool-making. It was about the legacy of knowledge, the unbroken thread connecting generations past to the present, ensuring the survival of our clans, one carefully crafted tool at a time. The shared experience forged a connection, a bond stronger than the simple exchange of a knife. We were different clans, but the weight of tradition and shared experience transcended our differences. It was in these subtle, quiet moments, shared between strangers in a twilight forest, that the true strength of our shared humanity shone through. The fire crackled, a counterpoint to the stranger's humming. It was a low, repetitive tune, almost hypnotic, a sound that seemed to vibrate in the very bones of the earth. I hadn't heard anything like it before, a melody unlike the occasional chanting I'd heard from our elders during ceremonies. It wasn't sad, nor particularly joyful, but possessed a strange, earthy quality, as if woven from the very fabric of the forest itself. The stranger's fingers moved rhythmically, almost unconsciously, as if the music flowed from some deep well within. They were crafting something, carefully shaping a length of wood with a small, sharp stone. Their movements were precise, fluid, mirroring the steady rhythm of their song. And then, the scent. It drifted on the evening breeze, a sweet, unfamiliar perfume that cut through the smells of wood smoke and damp earth. It was floral, but not like the pungent blooms I knew, not the sharp scent of the meadow flowers that attracted the bees. This was softer, sweeter, more elusive. A delicate perfume, almost imperceptible, yet potent enough to stir something deep within me. A memory. It unfolded slowly, like a flower unfurling its petals in the warm sun. I was very young, perhaps no older than the child I'd helped earlier. I remembered a field, bathed in the golden light of late afternoon. Flowers of a similar sweetness, though I couldn't quite grasp their form. My mother, or perhaps it was my grandmother, was kneeling, gathering herbs, her fingers brushing against the velvety petals. Her humming was similar to the stranger's now, a low, repetitive song that blended with the sounds of the forest. The memory was hazy, fragmented, but the scent, that delicate, sweet fragrance, anchored it firmly in my present. The feeling that accompanied the memory was profound, a sense of peace, of belonging, of being utterly and completely safe. It wasn't the same security I felt near the fire, the comforting warmth of the clan. This was different. This was a deeper, more primal calm, as if I was nestled within the heart of the forest itself, protected by its ancient rhythms and hidden secrets. The stranger continued humming, their hands never pausing in their work. Their song and the scent of those unseen flowers created a cocoon of tranquility around us, a space where fear and uncertainty dissolved into a quiet acceptance of the world. The boar, the storm, the uncertainty of the next day, all faded into the background, muted by the powerful peace of the moment. The stranger stopped humming, their song ending as abruptly as it began. They looked up, their eyes meeting mine. There was no challenge in their gaze, only a shared understanding, a silent acknowledgement of the moment we had just shared. A bond, forged not in words or deeds, but in scent and song, in shared memory and a fleeting, powerful sense of peace. The air hung heavy with the scent of the flowers, a reminder of the fragile beauty and unexpected connections that existed in this harsh, unforgiving world. For a brief moment, I felt a sense of connection, not just with this stranger, but with something far larger, something ancient and enduring that connected all beings in this wild, beautiful place. The faint sweetness of the flowers lingered, a lingering promise of tranquility in the face of the encroaching darkness.
The embers glowed, painting the faces of the sleeping forms around me in flickering orange and black. A comfortable warmth radiated from the fire, chasing away the night's chill. My eyelids felt heavy, the day's exertions finally catching up. The rhythmic crackling of the fire, the soft breaths of those around me, the gentle rustle of the wind through the grasses outside the rock shelter, all combined to lull me into a state of drowsy contentment. I was almost asleep. The events of the day, the hunt, the shared meal, the stories around the fire, fading into a pleasant haze. Then it pierced the stillness. A sharp, high-pitched cry, thin and reedy, cut through the night. It was unmistakably a child's cry, filled with a raw, agonizing terror that sent a jolt of adrenaline through me, instantly shattering the peace. My eyes snapped open, the drowsiness gone, replaced by a fierce alertness. The cry seemed to come from the nearby forest, swallowed almost instantly by the vast, echoing silence that followed. My heart hammered against my ribs. Fear, sharp and cold, mixed with a surge of protective instinct. A child alone in the darkness. The thought sent a shiver down my spine. We were vulnerable here, out in the open, exposed to the dangers of the night. Predators roamed these woods, their hunger as relentless as the cold. Instinctively, I reached for my spear, the smooth, cool wood familiar and comforting in my hand.
The firelight danced across its sharpened point, reflecting a fierce determination in my eyes. I couldn't ignore the cry. I had to know what had happened. I had to help. Hesitantly, I moved away from the fire's warmth, the sudden cold a physical manifestation of my apprehension. Each step was taken with a careful deliberation, my senses heightened. The forest loomed around me, a wall of shadows punctuated by the occasional glint of moonlight on damp leaves. The air was thick with the smell of damp earth and pine needles, a scent that usually brought a sense of calm, but now only added to the tension. The rustling of unseen creatures in the undergrowth sent shivers down my spine. Every snap of a twig, every rustle of leaves amplified my anxiety. But the memory of that terrified cry spurred me onward, pushing aside my fear. I had to find the source of that sound. I had to know if the child was safe. The darkness seemed to press in on me, closing in from all sides. Yet I continued moving toward the direction of the cry, guided by instinct and a growing sense of urgency. With every step, my resolve grew stronger, fueled by the possibility of finding a frightened child and bringing them back to the safety of our fire. The night felt alive, filled with unseen dangers, yet my determination held firm. I had to find them. I had to help.
The forest floor was a tapestry of shadows and half-light, the moon's pale glow barely piercing the thick canopy. Each step crunched underfoot, the sound amplified in the stillness, a stark counterpoint to the child's whimpers. Damp earth clung to my worn leather sandals, the scent of decaying leaves heavy in the air, a mixture both earthy and faintly sweet. It was a smell I knew, the smell of the forest floor after a rain, a smell I usually associated with the hunt. But tonight it felt different, heavier, laced with a primal unease. My breath hitched in my throat, a gasp swallowed before it could fully form. The whimpers were closer now, more distinct, tinged with a note of terror that tightened my chest. I moved slowly, deliberately, my senses straining to make out any movement in the darkness. Every rustle of leaves, every snap of a twig sent a jolt of adrenaline through my body. The forest was alive with unseen creatures, their presence a constant whisper in the shadows. I pressed forward, the sound of the child my only guide, a fragile thread in the vast, silent expanse of the forest. The air grew colder, the dampness clinging to my skin, a shiver tracing down my spine. I raised my hand, brushing aside a low-hanging branch, its rough bark scratching against my palm. The sensation startled me, bringing me back to the present moment, a reminder of the tangible world against the overwhelming fear. The whimpers stopped abruptly. A silence so deep, so absolute descended that it almost felt like a physical presence. My heart pounded in my chest, a frantic drumbeat against the stillness. I held my breath, listening, straining my ears to catch even the faintest sound, the slightest shift in the night's symphony. It felt like an eternity, suspended in the balance between fear and hope. Then a faint sound, like the rustling of cloth against leaves, broke the silence. It was close, very close.
I moved carefully, inching forward, the fear battling with a growing sense of determination. I had to find the child. A clan depended on each other. This was our responsibility. The path opened into a small clearing, bathed in a sliver of moonlight. There, huddled beneath the gnarled roots of an ancient oak, was a child, no older than 5, clutching a small, injured bird. The child's clothes were torn, their face streaked with tears and dirt. Their breathing was ragged, shallow. The child looked up, their eyes wide with fear, but a flicker of relief also shone through their tears. I slowly knelt beside them, offering a reassuring smile. The injured bird was nestled close to their chest, its small wing drooping. I gently reached out to the child, offering a comforting touch to their shoulder. The child didn't flinch, but instead leaned into my hand, their small body trembling. For a moment, we simply sat there in the silence of the clearing. The only sounds the child's soft sniffles and the gentle rustling of leaves around us.
The child slept soundly, nestled against my chest, the small bird quiet in its makeshift nest of leaves within my cloak. The forest, still hushed from the storm's passing, breathed around us, a damp, earthy scent clinging to everything. The stranger from the other clan sat a few feet away, a silhouette against the pre-dawn gloom, tending a small fire. Its embers glowed faintly, casting long, flickering shadows that danced like restless spirits. My own weariness was profound, a deep, bone-aching tiredness that settled in my limbs. But there was no longer the sharp edge of fear, replaced by a quiet contentment. Holding the child, I felt a warmth spread through me, a kinship that transcended the boundaries of our separate clans. The shared struggle, the shared relief, had forged a bond stronger than any tribal allegiance. The stranger stirred, their movements slow and deliberate, as if loath to break the fragile peace. They offered me a piece of roasted root, its earthy sweetness filling the air, a simple gesture of comfort and shared sustenance. I accepted it gratefully, the taste a strange blend of nourishment and quiet understanding. As the first rays of dawn touched the forest canopy, painting the leaves in hues of gold and rose, the child stirred. Their tiny hand reached out, grasping mine with surprising strength. Looking down at their peaceful face, I felt a surge of protectiveness, a fierce love that surprised me in its intensity. It wasn't just for my own clan, but for this small, vulnerable life that now lay within my care. The stranger and I exchanged a look, a silent acknowledgement of the shared experience, the unspoken understanding that bound us together. We were different, yes, from different bands, with different histories, but in this shared dawn, under the watchful eyes of the ancient forest, we were also the same. We were protectors, caregivers, survivors. We were part of something larger than ourselves, a thread woven into the tapestry of life, stretching back through countless generations and extending into a future yet unwritten. And as the sun finally broke through, bathing us in its golden light, I felt a deep, abiding peace settle over me, a peace born not of comfort, but of shared experience, of shared survival, of shared hope. The world, though still harsh and unforgiving, felt for this moment a little less lonely.